lesson, or to read Lamentations. Anybody remember that? It was there just before Pastor came in. So we're going to go right back to that book, Lamentations. Lamentations. It's good to see all of you out on this evening. Lamentations chapter 3. Anybody remember?
Lamentations.
I asked you to look at a particular scripture last time, just before Pastor came in. So that means y'all wasn't listening.
I wasn't here.
All right,
What was Lamentations 21?
Lamentations 3, verse 21. That's what I asked you to like. Very good there. I asked you to look at that. That's the A student in the class. You remember that now, sister? All right. We'll ride on her coattails, huh? Amen. We're in Lamentations chapter 3. And we're going to look. We're going to start at verse 20.
Okay.
Verse 20 and 21. It says, "My soul has them still in remembrance, and is humbled in me." Verse 21. "This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope." This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. And we just want to look at the title for this lesson is titled, "Therefore I have hope." The book of Lamentations is a book of lamenting, and lamenting is a passionate expression of grief or sorrow, wailing, cry out in grief. That's not a word that we hear that much of, is to lament it. But back in that time, the Hebrews had a way of lamenting. When you say they would sit in sackcloth and ashes, they would rent their clothes. They would sit in some ashes and the little sackcloth that they would put on, and that is a deep grief and sorrow. And one of the words you hear is wailing. It's not just like a cry. It's just like it's from the deep recesses of your soul of hurt and of pain. And that's what this whole book of Lamentations talks about. This great grief of wailing, pain, suffering, sorrow. Did that get everybody's attention? The theme of that is pain, suffering, sorrowfulness, or great wailing. But before we can get to that, we need to look at how it came about that they got to this point. How it came about. Jeremiah is the author of this book. It's attributed to him. Some theologians say it used to be part of his book, Jeremiah, but they broke it up because there's, and Israel has a lot of feasts that they do to remember. And at one of the feasts, they read this book. So they separated it, and they wanted it to be apart. But there's nowhere written that it was Jeremiah, but all of the style of writing and everything signifies that it is Jeremiah that wrote the book. And how did we get to this great will? We get to this when you read in Jeremiah. Jeremiah, how would you have liked to have been this prophet? Jeremiah, he was called. So I told him he called him. He knew him before what? Before it was formed in his mother's womb. He said, I knew you, I called you, and I ordained you to preach. And that's what he did. And he preached, and he preached. He was also called the what? The weeping prophet, because all of his messages and all of his preaching, Brother Smith, it fell on deaf ears. He preached to the people about their number one thing, sin, about their sin, about their falling away from God. It was sin that ran rampant, not just with the people, but with the prophets. The prophets was false prophesying. The priest was ruling with a stern hand and taking things. This had become the nature of the land. And all you had was Jeremiah, what? Preaching. Woe be unto you. Preaching the word of God to turn around. And the people ignored him. All throughout his book of Jeremiah, the people ignored him. And the whole basis of Lamentations is that sin has its consequences. Sin, it has its consequences. Now this was the other thing. As he was preaching to them, and the prophets was false prophesying, and the priests were ruling with his eyes, the people loved it. The people was feeding into it. The people was going along with all of the mischief and just the things that were against God. So we come to this book of Lamentations, in the 3rd chapter, and we see, it says, my soul hath them still in remembrance of me, and is humbled in me. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. But before he got to that part, we talked about all what was happening in the land. Let's look at those first verses of Lamentations, chapter 3. And let's find out where Jeremiah was. This wasn't about the people. This was him now. He's going to look at where he was. Let's look at that. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 1. We're going to follow along. We're going to hit some strong points and we're going to bring it home. It says, let me get these things on. It says, I am the man had seen affliction by the rod of his wrath. This is Jeremiah talking about himself. He said, he's seen the affliction by the rod of whose wrath? Of God's wrath. He had led me and brought me into darkness, but not into light. Surely against me is he turned his hand against me all the day. This is a prophet of God. He says, surely I have been so low. I have seen affliction. Sister Baker, God, I have seen his wrath. I've been so low. He said, sure, he has turned from me. I'm not in light. I'm the prophet of God. I don't feel I'm in light. I feel that I'm in darkness. Right. He has turned from me. What you see already at the beginning, Jeremiah said, man, what is this I'm going through? I am a prophet of God. But yet he said, I feel like his hand is turned against me. He said, my flesh, verse 4, chapter 3, verse 4, he said, my flesh and my skin had he made whole. He had broken my bones. He had built against me and compassed me with gall and travail. Gall is just bitterness. They gave Jesus that when he was on the cross. They stuck that thing in his mouth so he could say, it's just gall. It's a bitterness in your mouth. But he wasn't talking about a bitterness in his mouth. He was talking about a bitterness in his soul. No. He said, I got bitterness in my soul because of the sin that has laid hold of Jerusalem and the people. And the Lord sent me to preach to them against that. And they laughed at me. That was another reason why he was crying. They laughed at him. He said, I don't even want to do this. But he said it's like what? It was like fire. He said, shut up in his bones, that he had to do what? He had to preach in the midst of all of this. So he says, this bitterness that encompassed me, this travail, all of these difficulties and problems. Verse 6 of Lamentations. We're in Lamentations chapter 3, verse 6. It said, he had set me in dark places, as that they be dead of old. He had hedged me about, that I cannot get out. He had made my chains heavy. Also when I cry and shout, he shutteth out my prayer. Boy, how would you like to get to the point where you think your prayer is not being heard? not only is it not being heard, God shut it out. It's like when he said he turned his back, you know, when the Syrophoenician woman came unto Jesus and they turned him away. The disciples turned him away, Sister Winsler, and then they said Jesus did what? He turned his back. But that lady had to persist. He said, it feels like my prayer cannot get through. I'm relating to the Syrophoenician woman because she had a sick child. What is it that we would not do for a sick child in our house?
Amen.
I mean, we'll climb bricks and fire and go through fire and wall. A sick child, one of ours, one of children sick, we'll go through anything. But it seems like God had shut him out. How would you like to be shut out of prayer or feel that way? He said, I was shut out. And then he says, he had enclosed my ways with hewn stone. He had made my path crooked. Oh, Lord. The path of the Lord is straight in righteousness, right? He said his path had got crooked. He got like weary. He said, don't go to the left or to the right, but stay on the straight path. That's how he's feeling in his soul. Is the bitterness getting through to you about where Jeremiah is at this time? This grief, lamenting, this grief and sorrowful crying and wailing out. He said, he was unto me as a bear lying in wait, and as a lion in secret places. A bear lying in wait. And boy, they tell me if you ever stumble across a bear. I was watching, I love the Discovery Channel and all those animal channels. I was watching these guys climbing all of these spots, which I like to do. I like to go to remote places and climb. But I was like, man, these guys are way up in the mountain, and they woke up a bear. That bear came out there and just beat him up.
Yeah.
But it's like a bear lying in wait. And the bear will protect his cubs. And also like a lion. Like when you see when the lion's getting ready to pounce on the thing, how it said it crouches. Come on, y'all, that's how he felt. Here's a prophet of God who has been called. He's feeling that he's shut out of prayer. His tears and stuff, his soul is bitter. He feels like he's been attacked. He's like a bear or a lion in wait for him. I don't know if you get it before I got it. It messed me up reading this. I wanted to read something else. I wanted to get to where we all know. 22. That's what we all like. Verse 22, it says, it is of the Lord's mercy that we are not accomplished, and his compassion faileth not. His mercies are new every morning. That's the part that we hear all the time. But we didn't hear all of this other stuff. We forgot to read this. And then he said in verse 11, he had turned aside my ways and pulled me in pieces. He had made me desolate, empty, barren, in ruin. He had bent his bow and set me as a mark for the arrow. Y'all know what that is, huh? He bent the bow. Right here is just straight. When he bent it, and the arrow is in your target. I got you in my sights, Deacon Charles. I got you a big buck deer over there, man. I got you in my sight. That's how he felt. That arrow was set on him no matter what. He should, not only was it in his sights, but it was already, it was ready to let go. Because you know when you bend that thing back, you can't hold that too long. You know, all these country boys, yeah, y'all know that, man. I tried that. Oh, I could do that. I got that, man. A little bit of scrawny guy was laughing at me. He said, oh, go ahead on, sir. You know, I'm trying to brag. Yeah, I could do that. Look at that, man. The arrow falling down and stuff. And when I finally got it, man, my arm was hurting. A little bit of scrawny boy. I mean, scrawny, got that thing. See, it was in his sights. It The Lord's mercies are new every morning. They're new every morning. His compassion faileth not. How did he get to that point? There was some bitterness that he had to go to before he could say, therefore I have hope. There was some bitterness. There was some bitterness, and he's dealing with it. And he's dealing with it strong. And then in verse 13, he had caused the arrows of his quiver to enter into my range. Oh, it hit me now. It made contact. I was a derision to all my people, and their song all the day. And their song all the day. I was a derision. I didn't get through to the people. They made fun of me. I cried. I preached. I told them that they were sinning. The people were full of sin. The leaders were false prophesying. And woe unto a man or a woman of God that is false prophesying. Woe unto them. Reverend Leggins, Reverend Chris, high calling for the Lord. Boy, the Lord could deal with. I remember Pastor Randall from Louisiana was going to do our revival. I remember after the men's conference there, we had a chance to fellowship, and he was talking about how he had a great number of preachers came to the conference, but he was talking about how some had fallen away from their calling, and how they were misleading the people. And he said, man, woe unto them, because God deals intricately with his chosen one, with those that he called. And he gives us all that time and space to come back. But those that just fall away, he said, woe unto them. And here is the prophet who was called to preach. And he's got all of this bitterness in his soul. Seems like he's about to give up, huh?
Yes.
I've been there some days.
I know.
It says,
Hallelujah.
in their song all the day, he had filled me with bitterness. Here's that word. He filled me with bitterness. He had made me drunken with the wormwood. That bitterness, oh, that nasty. He had also broken my teeth with gravel stones. He had covered me with ashes. And thou hast removed my soul far off from peace. I forgot prosperity.
Hallelujah.
Here is this man of God crying out. And it's all because of what? Sin. That is the main story of Lamentations. Sin. Sin has its consequences.
Amen.
Sin. Even with the man of God, how he felt. Because Jeremiah was a good man, a devout man, a man that preached, a man that didn't turn away, a man that got laughed at by the people, but he continued to preach. He said it was like what? It was like that fire, shut up. You have to preach. When you call to preach, brother, it's like, hey, no matter what they say, Reverend, it's shut up in my bones. I have to. It has to come out. And here, he's at a low place because of the consequences of sin and what the people have to pay for. Jeremiah was not there sinning, but Jeremiah was feeling the consequences of the sin. You know, sin in my house can serve as consequence for everybody in there who's not, even the people who are not sinning. Doing good, living right, all in the right places, but there are consequences for sin. And it could affect everyone, innocent people. And here's a nation that it had affected. And the first question might be, to Jeremiah might ask, or I might ask, Lord, I didn't do that. Lord, why I got to quit? I was doing what you told me to do. I wanted to quit. I couldn't quit. I stayed on. There were consequences for it. Jeremiah is at a bitter level in speaking. And then we wrap up. We get to the end. It's kind of like a part. I'm not somebody who could do parts of series. I just do it all in one rep. I don't know how to get all the parts. But this is a lot. So I'm not going to try to do it all. In verse 17, I read that, but he said, and thou hast removed my soul far off from peace. You know when your soul is not at peace, boy, you're a mess. How many know you could be a mess? And then, listen, we could go through some little simple stuff that cause us to be a mess when our soul is not at peace.
Amen.
But here, this prophet was dealing with the sins and the consequence of a whole nation. That he did what he was supposed to do, and he's feeling this upon him. He said, it's removed from me. I forgot prosperity. I forgot the goodness of Jerusalem. This rich land. These God people. I forgot what all that looked like. And then in verse 18 he said, and I said, my strength and my hope is perished. That's what your Bible says? Yes. It's perished. It's gone away from the Lord. And then verse 19 he says, remembering mine affliction and my misery, the wormwood and the gall, the bitterness. All of that is going from you. Remembering his affliction, his bitterness, all of that. This I call to remembrance. Come on, read that with me. Verse 21. Somebody read it with me. This
I call to mind, therefore I have hope.
Would we say Jeremiah was wrapped up in the earlier verses? He was wrapped up, tied up. Would y'all agree with me? He was wrapped up, he was tied up, he was bound, he had no peace.
Right.
He might as well have been in the grave. He was bitter in his heart, no peace in his soul. He was wrapped, he was entangled with all of this. But yet, he still was able to say, I was able through all of that affliction, all of this heaviness, all of this weight of preaching to the people, and the people not listening, and the people have gone far away. Listen, this is the rulers, the false prophets. The prophets was false prophesying for their own gain. The priest was ruling with heavy hand. The people were going for it and caught up in it. You know how when some people think the grass is always greener on the other side, they just always want to go to the other side. Things always appear. And then you know how you could take a person and you could put them, you could rescue them from, you could rescue some children from a bad situation. Bad situation. Drugs in the house, beatings, emotional degradation, physical degradation, abuse, all types of abuse. You could rescue that person out of that, put them in a good home, and give them all the nutrients and all of the things that they need. They still gonna have, some of them still gonna have that pull to the other side. It's like that pool. They know, and they tell themselves, but it's good over there, it's good there. They know that that's not the best place for them.
Right.
They know right here is the best place for them. but yet they do what? They pull and we hold them. Jeremiah's preacher, don't go that way. He's grabbing, don't go that way. Go this way. And they pull him and they kick him and they cry and they get out here. And, oh yeah, I'm living now. Full of what? Sin. Full of sin. Sin. And this man had to go through all of that. What was the consequence? What was the consequence of the nation? You said, you remember I told you sin has its consequences. What was the consequence? Come on, just throw something out. Normally when God punished them, he did something. What did he do? What was the consequence? Anybody? It's not a right or wrong. Not how much you know. And whether they say, oh, you're wrong. I got you. No, I won't do that. What do you think the consequence was for the nation of Israel?
A curse.
A curse? That could be it. That's a good thought. How you doing? Good to see you. What you say? Famine. That's another thing he brought. Curse the people, the land, famine. What else?
Captivity.
Talk to me, Brother Barty.
Captivity.
Captivity. That which he brought them out of 400 plus years, and that under the weight and the rule of the thumb of the Egyptians and the beating and the down and stuff, that which he brought them out of. He allowed to come back on that. Listen, Jerusalem, no more. Total destruction. Desolate, in ruin. Listen, they say that there was famine, there was no food. The enemy came in, the Babylonians came in and took everybody. They was trying to find food. There was no food. They were selling up their children for food. They gouged the king's eyes out. They say bodies lay in rot in the street. And Jeremiah is lamenting over this is God's people. You know, they used to do a lot of things with stones back then, and they remember things. They would build, all throughout the Bible, they say, we're going to call this land here something because remember God saved here, or God delivered here, or God did something here. They would use stones up and say, we do this to remember those times. All desolate. And I just equate that to a home, a community, a church, a business, something that is so prominent. You get where I'm going, especially the home. Something that God has put in order, the home. And now it lay desolate in ruin. Our homes are fractured, broken, discarded, and everything else. We have all types of things happening in our home today. Something that God has built up, and something that our foreparents was telling me, stay with your family, stay with your family, stay with your family, preaching, and then our homes has just disintegrated. Has just gone with all manner of stuff has come into the home. Everything. And listen, you remember I said that the people were going along with it with the rule? Don't you see that today? People are going along with women and men with men in the homes and transvestite with untransvestite and this person with that person, and the world makes sport of it. It is a good thing. The world says we benefit. Oh, I can't speak against them. I got to get votes. How can I speak against it? We're going to light up the house with all the rainbow colors of the LGBTQ. They said, hey, listen, I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it because I'll tell it to anybody who's around. They said that queer. It's like it's just acceptable. Like this young man is a very distinguished young man. He sits in leadership position in his church. He's on the board of this. He does this. That's how they say, oh, this this queer is very good. He dresses nice. He has his dresses on. He has his dresses on.
Amen.
And listen, the people are going
Along with it. Yes.
They're going along with it. Our leaders are putting that out there.
Yes.
They're all scared to speak against it. The one thing I discovered, and I thank God for this church, thank God for the leadership, teaching to give this church. Pastor said you got to get it for yourself. No matter how hard and strong he preached on it, he said, don't believe me, go get it for yourself. You got to know it for yourself. And when you go to get it, I thank God for that first getting. And then I thank him for the spirit of him just prying my heart, just getting my heart ready to want to go out and get it. And what the Bible says, you cannot teach against. It's like Gamaliel. He was in the book of Acts. And they brought forth on the day of Pentecost, they were preaching Jesus Christ. He risen from the dead. And they took him before, and the people were mad because they didn't want them preaching that stuff. The leaders, the Sanhedrin and all of them. And they laid hands on him and they brought him before the court. And they said, and when they was bringing him to the court, what were they doing? They was beating him and hitting him. And they brought him before the court. And all of them said, we should put these people to death. They're preaching Jesus Christ. He is crucified. He is not alive. He's not the King of the Jews. And all of them wanted to stone him. That sat on the council. But Gamaliel stood up and says, hold on. Just give some reasoning behind this. There once came a man, he rose up false teaching. He failed. There came another one, rose up false prophet. He failed. He said, we are to give these people space. He said, unless we find ourselves fighting against the very hand of God, what he was saying is, there is no win.
That's right.
And that's what the world is doing. We're fighting against the hand of God, the order and law of God. There's no queer in God. There's no confusion in God about my identity. There's no mistake in God about my identity.
Amen.
I was born this way. Well, that person was born with spina bifida. That person was born crippled and stuck in his arm. That person didn't change his nature. That person lived and progressed the way he was. That's a cross that person had to carry.
Amen.
The people were cheering it on. Jeremiah was bitter to his soul. But watching the land just lay desolate and waste, in ruin. But the title of the lesson is called, Therefore I Have Hope. The title said, this I recall to my mind. You ever been in a place feeling low about yourself, feeling down on certain things, think you can't get a break, how am I going to get it? But there's something come to your mind in the middle of the night. But you know the Lord brought me through that over here. The Lord brought me. Oh, I remember when my car was broke down. I used to have a car, y'all. Listen, I used to have a 280Z. I had a 240 and a 280Z. My 280Z broke down on every highway. 410, 1604, 35, 37, 151. I would not get on 281 because I knew it was going to break down on there. It broke down on all the other ones. I said, I won't get on 281 because that's the next one. I had a car that just broke down and I was thinking, poor pitiful me. But guess what? There was somewhere in my remembrance I brought from my mind, but you know the Lord's blessed me. He always got me out of it. He always made the way. I got to work on time. I was able to provide for my family through all of that. This I recall to my remembrance. Because he wasn't recalling that early, was he? He was low. He was broken. He was wrapped up, tangled up. Peace was falling from him. He felt like he was in the grave. But he said, this I call to my mind. Therefore, I have hope. Therefore, I have hope. I'm not going to even read verse 22. Because we read it all the time. That's where we start. But we know it. Go ahead, read it over again, and then get to verse 22. It is of the Lord's mercies that are new every morning. Therefore, I have hope. But not to erase that. Sin has its consequences. And my main focus that I was really trying to, what I saw that was really dealing with, as he was dealing with the nation, we have to look at this with our family. And our nation today. Truth isn't truth. Yeah. What is that? The truth is not the truth. That's what we're hearing from our leaders. The truth is not. And guess what? We got a whole line of people. The truth is not the truth. Yeah, the truth is not the truth. But he said there will come a time in the latter days, in the last days, where right will be wrong and wrong will be right. And people won't know the difference.
Right.
Do you see us in that time right now?
Oh, yeah.
We're in that time. With this, that we, the people of God, feeling like things are just broken down and crying out to God, what's happening, Lord? We have to bring back to our remembrance that it is of the Lord's mercy. I could bring that to my remembrance that I might have what? That I might have hope. That's the only thing that could get me through. I can't get through with all this other stuff. It's overwhelming.
It is.
And guess what? I got a family to take care of. I got kids. I got grandkids now. And they 3 and they, you know, all right, y'all. Hold on, pump the brake. Get some cable or something. I got 3 of the grandkids now. Our kids gone. Now you got to.
Amen.
But love, we got all of that. We want a better world for them and for our kids. And listen, as I close, we need to bring this to our remembrance that we have hope, because not only is our nation dependent on it, because the nation is going to go by the wayside, but for the people of God. I'm telling you, that could happen. But the people of God, our families that we got to keep in line. And so we got to have this hope that our grandparents, our great-grandparents had a thing in Louisiana a couple of weeks when I was out. A cousin who's just very gifted in all of the genealogy stuff. And he's been working on this for 20-something years and stuff. And man, he put something together. He went back 10 generations on my family, on my dad's side, on my grandfather's side, and then my grandmother, he went 8 generations back. Listen, didn't have a pen or paper in his hand. Speak 3 languages, French, Portuguese, and some other stuff. You know, they all sound the same to me. If I can't speak it, they all.
Right.
But he not a pen or paper in his hand. He knew the Spanish names, he knew the French names, he knew the years and everything. Our family is so. And can you imagine them looking down at us now? What do you think they would be saying? And in the books it says, woe unto me. All right, we're closing. Here's some scriptures for us to look at. And that's it really. In Jeremiah, here's some scriptures to look at. Jeremiah chapter 5. I think that's it. Tell me that shit right here. Yes. Jeremiah 5. If you look at that. 30 and 31. And then look at Lamentations 5 and 16. One, he's asking a question. Jeremiah is asking a question. And then the other one, he's telling them what's going to happen. So look at those and see how much we'll get busy. That we still have this hope. Amen? Amen. All right, we can close now. We can have our prayer circle. We can go home. Amen. That was Jeremiah chapter 5, we just read 30 and 31, and Lamentations chapter 5, verse 16. You're going to hear the word in there, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Come on, I'll go from here. We're just going to circle up here.